The Super Nintendo is well regarded for its collection of classic RPGs. You got your Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana, Super Mario RPG, Final Fantasy III, Earthbound, and of course the most famous of them all, EVO, Search for Eden. I'm kidding. Heck, thanks to Ness and his friends, it's not even the most expensive. I find this game absolutely fascinating. For the longest time, I only had a short article in Nintendo Power Volume 50 to go off of. And frankly, the concept of the game was hard to wrap my head around. It was the Spore, or No Man's Sky, of its time. At least for me. And it stayed that way as this exciting impossibility for many years until I finally got the chance to emulate the sucker and play it for myself. Right off the bat, let's talk about the title. EVO Search for Eden. Is the game about science? Religion? Does it try to marry the two in perfect matrimony? Actually, it's not really faithful to any specific way of thinking. Eden, as the title suggests, can only be reached through evolution. But Gaia, the Earth, is Eve, and Adam starts the game as a fish. The sun sets this challenge in motion, and Martians try to intervene. It's all over the map, dabbling with science, religion, spirituality, and mumbo-jumbo in equal measure. And as for the evolution aspect, it would certainly not receive Richard Dawkins' stamp of approval. EVO doesn't depict subtle and iterative adaptation passed through genetics over a long period of time. No, in this game you evolve by eating other creatures. And once you gain enough experience, a new horn sprouts from your head. And the big leaps in evolution, rather than taking countless generations, occur when a boss is defeated. Seriously, the monolith from 2001, A Space Odyssey, pops up and opens like a door. I mean, it's a nice touch, but just like everything else, they're playing it fast and loose with the science fiction, too. The movie was way more subtle about this. But I guess that's a movie and this is a game. Fair enough, and hey, I'm just having fun. This isn't advertised as an edutainment title, and I didn't really expect it to present accurate science. Like I said, it's just interesting. Tonally, EVO is equally confounding. Often it's silly and cartoonish. There's a slapstick element to the way creatures move and behave, and a playfulness to their designs and certain musical tracks. But it's also sporadically depressing. By speaking with other life forms along your journey, you really get a sense of the cruelty of nature. In this regard, the game is actually quite profound. Species that can't quite cut it fade away, or linger beyond their time, sequestered to hidden areas, desperately clinging on to existence. The extinction of the dinosaurs is shown in great detail, and in the case of the bird people, defeating their leader leaves their descendants flightless and crying to the heavens. Oh, and don't get me started on the Yeti boss fight. You force your way into this guy's house and kill him in front of his child. And if that's not enough, you kill the mother too. The way the story unfolds, I have to admit, is really moving and gets you thinking about the world and our place in it. So yes, there's a lot of thematic and emotional depth packed into this cartridge. But what about the gameplay? Well, that's where things get a bit murky. The central evolution mechanic is a frankly genius idea, and for the most part, the execution is on point. Experience you gain by consuming other animals can be used to change parts of your body, and depending on your choices, you'll gain different stat boosts. So, upgrading your jaws might increase your attack power, or you can grow scales to increase your defense. These upgrades are broken into various tiers, so you can grow incrementally or save up experience points and go straight for the strongest upgrades. Also, most of these changes can be reversed as long as you're willing to grind. This is important because picking the wrong upgrade can sometimes negatively affect your other stats, and the game doesn't really warn you. There's some trial and error involved, which might be intentional, but it can be frustrating. If the game were more upfront about the outcome of evolutionary choices, it would be a lot easier to make an informed decision. As for attacking, the moves at your disposal are rather limited. You can bite enemies, jump on them, or charge at them with a horn attack. Unfortunately, since jumping doesn't do a lot of damage and horns break rather quickly, evolving your jaws for increased bite power is always the best option. I wouldn't even bother with the horns at all except for healing. You see, every time you evolve, you refill your HP. So upgrading yourself in the middle of a tough fight is the only way to stay in the game. Sure, you could change any part of your body, but growing the weakest horn is the cheapest solution, especially because you can immediately remove it for another low-cost recovery. In addition to the choices you make, you might also encounter situations where you undergo a sudden burst of evolution. In most cases, this is temporary. You jump back in the water as a dinosaur and regain the ability to swim. It's not a big deal, but it can be alarming since there are a few situations where you might be making a bigger commitment. For example, I was fully upgraded when I leapt from this cliff and became a bird. It's cool that I learned to fly, but since I lost every other upgrade, I had to return to an earlier area and slowly build myself back up. Had I known this, I might have stayed on the cliff. But ultimately this is a nitpick since that's kinda how the whole game is structured to begin with. At the end of each chapter, you grow into an entirely new life form and have to start again. But in this case, I was halfway through the age of the dinosaurs and did not expect to go back to square one. In general, to really appreciate this game, you need to be a fan of the grind. It is rewarding to enter a new age at the bottom of the food chain and work your way up, but I can see how it might be disappointing to repeatedly find yourself back at the bottom of the ladder. Still, without the grind, there's not a lot to do. Chapter 5 is the only one that doesn't make you reset your build, and as a result, it feels like a bit of a victory lap. Most of the areas contain weak enemies and little to no challenge, and the chapter only gains momentum just as it's wrapping up. Depending on your preferences, EVO will either be boring or relaxing. Goals are never too far away, and there's a satisfaction to moving between each chapter's areas at the correct pace, maintaining the perfect cross-section between manageable enemies and decent experience returns. The only real trouble comes with the bosses. As with any other RPG, they act as roadblocks, forcing you to gain enough strength to proceed. But they're also pretty bullshit. Usually there's a correct way to fight them, but since stun locking is so prevalent, you might have more luck just timing your attacks in such a way that they can't really fight back. totally negating the intended design. Oh, and this goes both ways. Bosses can do the same to you, locking you in a position you can't possibly escape. And that's never fun. This caveman fight near the end is especially frustrating. His main club swing attack won't kill you, but it launches you back to the world map, forcing you to wait while you load back into the fight to try again. I eventually found a winning strategy and he wasn't so tough, but until that point, it wasn't really challenging, it was just super annoying. It does sometimes feel good to finally overcome these challenges, especially when the solution involves learning a strategy or altering your evolution. For example, here I shortened my neck to allow for quicker attacks necessary to react to the boss's windup. But these instances are few and far between. Usually victory is just about overleveling and/or getting lucky. The other area where EVO really drops the ball is in its level design, or lack thereof. This makes sense when you're a fish in the ocean, but even when you get to land, the vast majority of the areas you explore are just flat plains populated by different species of enemies. There are instances of elevation, but they're few and far between, and usually just copy and pasted from other levels. And to make things worse, the handful of areas that do feature more interesting geography are the worst kinds of mazes. The Birdman Fortress, for instance, is populated with a bunch of teleporters. And the correct path through begins with you jumping back into the same teleporter 3 times before trying any of the others. And then there's something like the Last Ocean. It's an underwater labyrinth with no sense that you're getting deeper or closer to your goal. The monkey hideouts with elevators are the least offensive of the lot, but still just as aimless. You don't feel like you're exploring, just fumbling around and hoping to stumble on the right path. I understand that in its current form, your character's movement is too clumsy to allow for more complex platforming, but this might have alleviated the stale level design. There's already movement stats in the game, so it's weird that there's never a point where increased jump height or running speed is truly beneficial. Overall, EVO Search for Eden is just too weird to ignore. It's definitely a polished product with excellent 2D sprites and scrolling backgrounds, an atmospheric soundtrack, and an excellent concept. Yes, it does stumble a bit and never really comes together to establish the game as a true classic, but the ambition is certainly there, and hey, sometimes that's all you need.